Hello, good day, greetings wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. Now, this podcast, True Hope Cast, it really takes a deep dive into mental health's many psychological and physiological aspects. And this is the show for you if you're looking for motivation, inspiration, knowledge, and solutions. And that's really what we're all about here at True Hope Canada. True Hope Canada is a mind and body based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can visit truehopecanada.com. Today, though, I welcome Mechelle Wingle to the show. Now, she is a gifted teacher, healer, and mentor. She is trained and certified in natural healing, CBT, and neuro-linguistic programming. Mechelle has also been featured in Women's Health magazine and several TV segments. Her take on weight loss is quite revolutionary. She helps her clients understand and take action, and at the same time supports them in learning to love themselves as they are. She authored the book, A Mentality Workout Exercises for Permanent Weight Loss in 2015 after keeping her own weight off for 8 years. Today, we're going to be discussing the wrong and right approaches to weight loss. Enjoy the show. Okay, well, welcome to the show, Mechelle. Thank you so much for joining True Hope Cast. I really appreciate your time today. I'd love to, I can't wait to learn more about you and what you do, but how are you? What is going well?
Great. I'm so grateful to be here. And I love the idea of true hope. I think hope is underrated. I think sometimes we think of hope as like crossing our fingers, or just please, please, please. But I think we can look at hope as this opening up and a powerful way to manifest what we want, to think of hope in that way. And so I really love that. I love the message of hope and of what you guys are on a vision to do. So I'm grateful to be here. I love talking with like-minded people and discussing everything wellness and wholeness. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Everything's going great. It's a little rainy outside, but I'm ready to, it's got those fall warms, cozies, and cuddlies, and I'm kind of excited for that to start. It's been warm, and then all of a sudden it just changed in the last few days. So now it's kind of fun to move into that winter mode.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that those warm spring, summer months, they're a certain period of time, like 4, 5, 6 months, and then everyone's kind of ready to kind of settle down a little bit more and get the warm clothes out. And it's surely it's about staying warm and cozy and maybe slowing things down a little bit. But it's very important to recognize that our biology was designed to very much slow down and literally do nothing during these times. So it's important that we maybe recognize that we shouldn't be going so fast and going at 100 miles an hour during those winter months as well. We should be working with the seasons, not just with our food, but also our work habits, our stress habits, all of those things. So yeah, it's a good reminder when the weather gets a bit chillier. We should take that as a message that it's time to slow down a little bit.
To wind down. Yeah. I agree that the earth is letting us know things are going to be different for a minute.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Those transition periods are very, very important, whether they're just big ones like the seasons or even just going from night to day or from home life to work life. It's important to stay conscious and aware of these time transitional periods and have consciousness around that and be aware that that's a transition time is very, very important. It's the way life is, and we can put a lot of energy into being kind of ready for those things, I suppose, rather than I don't know, mourning the summer. But we'll be right. It will come again. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Well, why don't you let us know who you are and what it is that you do, please?
Okay. Well, what am I? I'm very different than I was maybe 10 years ago. I was very much being a mom and making sure spelling tests got studied for and shoe sizes were brought up to date. But things, my husband started to have some emotional, maybe even some mental health issues, and so we went to the doctor, um, and that was helpful. It probably saved him. We went to the doctor and we spent probably 5 years at least, on this journey of changing medications and trying it and feeling it work for a while, and then, it kind of fizzling out. In fact, I kept a really dedicated journal during that time so we could keep track of what was happening, because there was just this something in the air, something wrong, and so as we were kind of going through that with him, um, somehow it came into my life, just some of these holistic ways of doing things. I had a friend that would just kind of say these strange things about what she was learning from another friend of hers, and how she would go to have these appointments at this lady that did this thing called Reiki, and I just would kind of listen and kind of, didn't think much of it. But as things started to not solve all the way through in the medical side of things, it would kind of just come, and it would just kind of work for a minute and then not work. I started to listen to her a little bit more, and I've always been inclined to I always had this really, um, interest in this idea of who we are, and how that, how these our experiences affect us, and that kind of a thing. So it wasn't that far of a stretch, but, pretty soon I decided I was going to start. There was like an opportunity to take a class, and I took my first class and I really enjoyed it. And so from there, I moved on to I took a natural healing class, and I really enjoyed that. And then I moved into a master energy therapist, and that was fascinating, and learned lots of different things. And then I took my Reiki training, and that was really helpful. I really liked that. That was really a big influence on me and helped me a lot, because going through having him go through his thing brought on a lot of my stuff. It was very stressful. It's like sometimes when we have a physical ailment, we have teams of people, that come together and work on that ailment. I use this example. I have a sister, her husband was diagnosed with cancer, and within days of that diagnosis, he had probably 4 or 5 doctors, and they're calling each other, and they're doing their thing to get him taken care of. And it was shocking to me and it was just kind of, I just saw it so plainly when he passed away. She had nothing, and yet I felt like her injury, her wound, her dis-ease, being out of ease in life, was just as traumatic to her sense of well-being as his was. She took this hit, and there's just not a process to allow that to be impactful for your life. It's just kind of left up to the person to kind of do that. And I felt that way in dealing with my husband and seeing those kind of things. It was kind of like there was these surface kind of things to help, but there was nothing that I felt went really deep. And until I started to find some of these modalities, and I took a class or a certification, called heart-centered therapy, and it's very much about looking at these signature points in our lives, and how when they're painful, whether that's mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual pain, that comes in, and then to kind of bring ourselves into congruence, we kind of leave part of ourselves behind. So an example would be, a lot of times in childhood, this may happen where I get in trouble. Let's say I get in trouble for doing something, and maybe there's some kind of separation that happens, whether that's go to my room or sit on timeout, these kind of things. Well, our human biology wants connection and autonomy. We want 2 things at the same time. We want to be accepted by our group, and we also want to be a little bit of an individual. Well, in these moments where we're threatened with that separation, a lot of times we say to ourselves, oh, I got to be different so that that never happens again. And so we kind of leave behind the little pieces of ourselves. So if I get in trouble, then here's this a simple example. Then, in order to make sense of that feeling I have and to protect myself from it happening again, then I accept that I was bad in that moment, let's say. And so in order to accept that truth of I am bad, then maybe we'll let go of I'm good, and we kind of compartmentalize somewhere, put that deep away so that now things make sense in the world. We can make sense of our lives and we can move forward. And so we fragment a little bit. And so a lot of what I do is going back and finding those moments where we have fragmented the truth of ourselves and bring it back into wholeness, and to feel like we're whole, and to recognize that we're always whole, but that we are always whole, and it's a continuous process. It's kind of a little bit of a paradox, but that when we in a session or working with someone, we can bring those together until they can feel that way, till they can feel whole, they can accept their wholeness and restore those aspects of themselves. And I a while back, probably about 2008, 2009, I lost a bunch of weight. And I've since written a book about it, just kind of what it was, but it was a real full body, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical experience. And I was featured in Women's Health magazine, and we ended up doing about 6 hours of interviews for this poor woman, trying to understand what I had done to lose weight. She wanted to know what I ate and how much I exercised. And I kept track of what I ate, but I didn't restrict things particularly, and I didn't exercise hours a day. And so, because it was just this whole change about the way I thought about things, not just food, but about my possibilities, about my worth, all of those were part of this journey. And so, talking to her, and I'd have other people come up, well, how did you do it? How did you do it? And they just kind of want this recipe that they can follow. And so I was sitting there trying to think about that. And I was trying to come up with a way that I could explain this to someone else, and all of a sudden this question kind of popped in my head that said, we always talk about emotional eating. What if that emotional eating is that weight from emotional eating lives in a place called the emotional body? And it was just this weird kind of different way of thinking that I hadn't ever thought about, but it just kind of like separated within myself these 4 bodies: the mental body, which is our thoughts, beliefs, the way we view the world cognitively; this emotional body that is our feeling. And I mean, it's almost the core of who we are. We had emotions long before we could cognitively think about something. We have this spiritual body, this part of us that knows there's something bigger than us. I love Carolyn Miss says their spiritual is the part of us that is connected to hope. I think that's a great example. Just this part of us that's connected and that finds meaning in things. There's that piece of us that finds meaning in things, and we each see things differently when it comes to that part of who we are. And the big kicker was when I came to that physical body and I realized that those thoughts and beliefs, those emotions, and that connection and meaning, I experienced those things physically in my body through sensations. And that body, which for so many of us is we are shameful of our bodies, or we think they're not beautiful, or we judge them. And to really realize that this is one of our biggest tools for experience, because we come in through sensation. We take in information through our senses, but we also process through sensations. If I have a big sense of love or hope, I am feeling that in my body through sensations, even more than, this linear cognitive experience in my head. I am really sensing that expression. And so taking care of that physical body became something very different for me. It became taking care of that tool, that vessel that can support me in having all these other areas show up in health, because if my body is not in good shape, like if it's not receiving the messages correctly, then I'm having a very different experience, and I think I think the key in understanding ourselves a little more is to move into the body and to get familiar with those sensations, get familiar with those parts that are in need of help or healing. And so many times those sensations have gotten, so maybe they've gotten overpowering at some point, and so we cut off our body, we don't feel those sensations, and we stay up in our mind, and that's a lot of pain that gets manufactured because that message isn't coming through. It kind of gets stuck in a way. So I understand it, because I think if we're there's a really good video on YouTube called the still face experiment. Have you ever heard about this still face experiment? Okay.
Nope.
So they've repeated this experiment hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's really fascinating. And they take a baby who's usually under 2, and they stick them in a room with their mom, and the mom is talking to them, and they're kind of just playing back and forth. And they ask the mom to go still face. They ask her to just not have any expression. So she's not angry, she's not upset, she just has no affect. And again, within 2 minutes, they try and do it for 2 minutes. And within 2 minutes, the baby has gone from, trying to get back this connection that they have, trying to be seen and heard, and to a full on, by the end of 2 minutes, they are in full trauma response, fight, flight, freeze, or appease. They're really uncomfortable. And so when we have these times in our lives where that has happened, it's really stressful to our sense of well-being, this part of us that isn't connected. And if you watch that, you can see the baby, the baby is in real life pain. And if you had to be put inside that much pain for longer than 2 minutes, it would be really easy to cut off and to not feel anymore. And Gabor Mate talks about that a lot in his books, but in his book Scattered, that's one of the results that turn into an ADHD, is this need to have to shut down and freeze in order to, because that could be what maybe many of times that was our only option. And then that mechanism worked, right? It worked in that moment when it was painful, but now 20 years later, when we are in, it doesn't work anymore, where it's kind of shut down and distracted. It's like, oh, let's check out here and think about things everywhere else, because it's uncomfortable here because it was at a certain time. So you can see that in that still face experiment. You see it in real life, and I just have so much compassion for all of us, because I think we've had those moments in different ways a lot. And I think we shut down our bodies a lot to numb that pain,
Certainly. We're so unbelievably energetic and emotional beings, regardless whether we're aware of it or not. And we're literally like antennas for frequency, be that positive emotion, negative emotion, things going on around us, things going on in our own psyche. Super interesting. You shared so much amazing information there. I want to go back to a couple of things that really stood out for me. So first of all was the you had the experience with your husband who was going
Mhm.
through some mental health stuff, and then going through 5 years of working with conventional medical practitioners. And you also made the interesting comparison to a friend of yours whose partner had cancer. And I think the really interesting piece that I picked up on there was that you can see, you can test in blood, you can do biopsies, you can do scans, and you can like physically see a cancer. And that
Right.
is a very, very different thing to, I can't see really the the physical matter in your brain that's causing the symptomology of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar,
Right.
etc. So if we can't
Mhm.
see it or see it on a test, it's very, very difficult for humans to really, really understand what's going on, especially when we can't like manipulate or fix it or do a surgery or give a drug that's like kind of effective. It's very, very
Right.
difficult for us to do that. And then you were talking about the Women's Health magazine piece that you did, and you were doing a 6-hour interview with this person. I'm sure this person was just trying to get out of you the specific foods you ate and the exercise that you did, because that's how we're driven as human beings to figure out our
Right.
problems. It's like that quick one thing you ate and that thing that you did to exercise, and then if I just do that, then I'm just going to lose my weight, regardless
Right.
of the obvious piece in all of that is most of us who go into, let's just say, our first big diet routine where we want to lose weight, and that's usually 99 times out of 100 the reason why we want to change our diet and start moving our bodies more, is to
Right.
lose weight because we don't feel brilliant about ourselves, because
Right.
there's an image in society which I'm supposed to attain to be like successful or whatever. And
Mhm.
that plays quite deeply on our internal emotional state. And it's just super fascinating that we would usually go into that new diet movement routine probably with quite a lot of, let's say, positive motivation, because okay, you've made the decision, you're going to do these things, this is what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. it's
Yep.
so it's just so difficult to sustain, let's just say, a restrictive
Right.
diet, as well
Mhm.
as trying to move your body in a way that it's not been used to doing. But like, let's say
Mhm.
you've got the motivation of a couple of weeks or a few weeks before your old habits start to creep back in, and you miss a workout, and you cheat on your nutrition plan or whatever. Let's just take
Mhm.
January every year as a prime example, and
Yeah.
think how many people like sign up for a gym for a year and they stop going after 3 weeks, right? Because the
Yep.
motivation is pure, it's good, it's great, but it's not deep enough. It's not got
Mhm.
the emotional integrity and emotional power that it would
Yeah.
be if you had so much more like wrapped around it. And I'm sure, like, when this person was interviewing you, trying to figure out like what it is that you did to lose all this weight and feel good, and then it's very difficult to obviously put a formula on that, but like,
Mhm.
it clearly sounds like you had your emotional integrity intact around those changes. Because I've done, I studied nutrition like 8 years ago, and at the beginning I was trying all these diets, I was trying all these ridiculous like master cleanse and all these things. I wanted to just try it to see what it
Yeah.
was like, because
Yeah.
I didn't want to recommend something to somebody without having done it myself.
Right.
And the things that have worked for me personally, because I used to be quite heavy when I was like in my early 20s. The things that
Yeah.
worked for me was when I ended up like letting go a lot of the ego and the kind of self hatred that came along with like not feeling great about my body. And obviously, when you do have a
Mhm.
lot of weight and you're not eating great and you're drinking too much alcohol, you are going to
Right.
you're going to feel bad most of the time, and you're not going to remember what feeling good like is like. And when I let go of a lot of those things, and I started to live in a lot more gratitude, happiness, and joy, and I let go of some of the self-judgmental stuff, I wasn't really doing too much different with my diet, and I wasn't really doing that much more exercise. It was literally, I was just changing. I was doing I'd say I was just doing an emotional cleanse. I was living more in
Yeah.
gratitude and happiness, and I was living in with like self-doubt and being egotistical and all that type of thing. And
Mhm.
my body was just like just working in a different way, and that must have been so difficult to explain
Right.
to somebody who probably interviews people on a weekly basis on the latest
R
diet fads and all this, and they're
right.
just looking for like, what's the simple formula? What can I put on the magazine this week to
Yeah.
get trending. So like,
Yeah.
did you ever come up with like explaining that energetic kind of formula piece wrapped around those changes?
Well, yeah, it sounds like we had kind of a similar thing, and that's the thing is like I think everything works. There's always somebody that will stand up and say, "This is the greatest thing ever. This is the thing that works." But I think it's something like that you were saying. It's like it worked because there was other things that clicked into place. Like this thing, whatever it was, empowered them enough that they started to see things differently, which is a little different than that particular thing taking the weight off your body. It's there. So the way I have a class. It's a 8-week program that I have on my website where I have broken down into adding something new every week. But in the classes that I teach, they all have different principles to them. So for instance, week 1 is start taking some kind of a multivitamin, some kind of a supplement. That's it. Like, and the goal is, and I talk about this, I said the goal is because what I want you to do, I want you to have in your mind and in your psyche and in your whole soul, I am doing everything I'm supposed to do, so that those do's and don'ts can kind of go away. Do you know what I mean? Because,
Oh yeah.
like you said, you get that motivation and you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And the human biology, our humanness we have to accept that they have all these other parts that come in and say, yeah, but I really like that, or I'm having a hard day today, and that's what used to be my go-to, and that willpower. So, I say we can talk about weight loss as willpower, or what if we thought about it as healing? What if it was something that we looked at as, let's go in and heal this thing, because for me, I'm talking for me, those food was sometimes medicine for me in a way that wasn't helpful. I remember after I lost my weight, one day I was sitting there and I was really uncomfortable. I was like, what is going on today? I am just feeling it. And I had no reason for it really that I could do it. But I recognized in myself, I thought, oh, my old me would have made a big batch of chocolate chip cookies. And that's how I would have counted that day as good because of the chocolate chip cookies. And that was fine at that time, but now I knew that I was not feeling okay and that I needed to address that not feeling okay. I needed to acknowledge that I wasn't feeling okay instead of just, I kind of touched it for 5 seconds, like back out and over here into the cookies. It was like I needed to hold that for a minute. So I just sat there. I was in the car waiting for my daughter to come out of school. And I just sat there and I was just sad for a minute. I mourned that I was sad, and I mourned that I probably felt this before, and I didn't, I pushed it aside. But I was sad in that moment, and even if I didn't understand all of what it was that was causing that myself to be sad, I was with myself in that sad, and just that, even that mind change made a difference. So my plan, I do have things that I have people do every week, but it's all symbolic of a bigger picture. And like I say, with step 1, it's like, let's just, because we have there's so many layers of, on top of diets or losing weight, it's all about what you shouldn't do, or what's bad, what's labeled bad. And it's so different. It's different for everybody. Some people, they can't have certain things, and other people, it doesn't bother them. And so let's really get intuitive with our own selves and really feel ourselves what we need. And so, yeah, so I have that class. I think it's just an online class. I think it's like $100. It's not that expensive, but it just works you through every week. There's a new habit to take on, and to really reflect on things that, and really, I hope, empower people to just feel like, let's reprogram the way that you think about that self. For me, that was a piece. I had 4 children, and my friend was having, she had some high cholesterol and things like that. So she was going and working on with a nutritionist to get her health in order. And I saw her lose all this weight. And I realized that, I mean, when I saw her, I just went, oh, she had 4 kids like me. All of a sudden I was like, oh, that's not a solid fact that I can't look or be thin if I've birthed 4 children. I mean, it was just some kind of a belief I had taken on that I had sacrificed my body because I had decided to have children. I don't know where that came from necessarily at the time, but I recognized that belief that was, really programming my way I was showing up in the world. And so when I uncovered that belief and it just shattered immediately, I knew that was one of the big ones. I knew within 24 hours that this was going to change. It was just done, because that truth was not a big T truth. It was just an opinion that I held. And when I could see it as an opinion and that I could change my mind, it made a huge difference. And so it wasn't, and so then I go into kind of looking at my food and all that stuff, not from this vantage point of losing the weight, but as in saying, I can do that, instead of like, I must not do this or I must not do this. It was like, I can be thin. Like, that was a huge belief that I took on. I can be thin.
Yeah.
That is a possibility. And I didn't have that before. So yeah, so I have outlined it. To answer your question, I have outlined it. And but I hope people take it with their own, and they experience it in their own way, and hopefully become empowered with it, versus that. And in fact, along with that, I have a coaching program where I coach people for 3 months. And to me, it's more about being with that person. It's more of almost like a therapy session, where it's like, because I think there's we have so much shame sometimes when we mess up, which is in quotes.
Yeah.
And I like to work people through all that they're feeling. Cause I that's just for me how I was. It was like that day I was having a hard day that day. And what would have been like if I had somebody to go to and say, oh, like last Thursday, I was just feeling it and I just wanted to eat cookies. And then we work through that feeling, we work through that emotion and figure that out. And so I think it's just kind of a fascinating way. It's very different than what you'll find, what the norm is about losing weight. But
yeah,
I think it's very emotional and spiritual and mental, very much so.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's interesting that there's many practices, like many therapies. I think CBT does this. I'm a little not too up to date with my CBT training, but like going backwards from the behavior, right? So you're talking about like the behavior of like making cookies or going to buy cookies and then just like smashing them in 10 minutes, like what that's a behavior that is a result of a particular set of thoughts and emotions, and something that's going on,
right?
So like backtracking that to the original thoughts that come up, and like, is there actually any validity to these thoughts that come up for me? And I suppose once you start analyzing those, you can actually, because you're always going to feel times of sadness, you're always going to feel times of anxiety and depression, but can you give yourself an alternative behavior that is going to benefit you a little bit better? Like at the end of the day, like I think an afternoon with a bag of cookies sounds awesome, but I also know that that going for a run or something, or just meditating or doing some yoga or just changing my environment and recognizing that it's okay to feel sad. Like it's okay to sit with that. I don't have to create a behavior to complete the experience of that thought, right? I can sit with it and digest it and be with it and recognize that sadness is a normal part of life, and sitting with that emotional state, because we're not always going to be capable and have the capacity to deal with all of the things that happen to us. I just want to ask you about, because we're just gliding through this podcast at the moment, and there's a bunch of things I want to talk to you about weight loss, but this has been awesome so far. Maybe we can get you back on and continue this further. But I want to ask you, what do we clearly have wrong about like our conventional understanding of weight loss. And I'm talking about those like men's health magazines and the women's health magazines and the horrific YouTube ads that I see about getting abs in 6 weeks. Like, what do we have so fundamentally, unbelievably wrong? And why is it so? There must be a reason why that same type of publication is being pumped out there, because people read it and they want to grab that quick fix. So like, what do we have wrong, and why is it why is the narrative not changing?
I think number one thing that we have wrong is, like you mentioned before, a specific standard of what is acceptable. And that acceptability is very narrow, like no pun intended, very narrow idea of what is beauty or what is just the way that we're supposed to look. We're all very, very different human beings. But at the same time, I imagine, and I could be wrong, but I imagine, I think if we took two people and we had two people who, let's say that one of them is heavier and one of them's thin, and we put them on an island somewhere and fed them the exact same food, exactly the same food, they might look a little different, but so they wouldn't. One might be very slim, like has smaller bones, or that's, I don't know if that's a thing, but like there would be some differences, but you wouldn't have this huge obesity. You wouldn't have this person that kept obese and this person that didn't. They would begin to look similar. So what is the difference then? And so we could just stop at that. It's the food that's the difference. And that if you just eat this food, then you're going to look like this person. But I think behind that is another step where it's like, why is that desire for food there? Our bodies are meant to be fueled in a certain way. And if we're eating beyond our capacity, something else is going on. And to me personally, I think a lot of times, well, for me, I think that was one way to numb off that body. If I am full, if my insides are stretched, then I have less of those. I have less picking up on sensations that are happening. So since I have calmed myself and really paid attention to my internal body, I get very distinct messages about what's happening in my world and maybe even in the world around me. A lot of people will call that empathic, being an empath. And that's very much true. I agree with it. But it is, if we break that down, I have sensations. Now, we have a lot of empaths that it's very destabilizing because they're just getting all these feelings. So that's why it's important to understand what those sensations are. I understand, oh, that sensation is grief, or that sensation is insecurity. And then I can put words to it and understand and figure out whether it's my own or whether it's someone else's. But the fundamental thing, I think, is to look past the food. That's not the end of the story. It's not just about the physical parts of the regiment, our food and exercise. That's only one part of it. Our thoughts and beliefs about ourselves. Because I say to people, you only have to convince one person. So it doesn't matter what your size is. If you walk out into the world feeling that you are enough and beautiful, the world will show up and meet you there. So we can we could do all the work, and we could restrict what the foods that we believe are bad. We could exercise the amount that we believe is the right amount. But if we could also do the same work on that mindset, to where, because that's the thing too, even when I lost my weight, it wasn't like some magic switch came on that says, wow, guess what? You're the hottest thing ever. It didn't. I felt good about myself, but it wasn't like there was this huge switch that I would have thought was there. I would have thought I would have no problems being a thinner person. I would have thought, these things. So it was this real belief about myself, those thoughts and beliefs, and then my emotions, really focusing on emotions. Those are the misunderstood parts of weight loss and being able to sustain it over a long time. And I think a lot of people use different words. They'll say, yeah, I just changed my whole life. I changed my lifestyle. I didn't make small changes. I made a lifestyle change. I would guarantee you that part of that lifestyle change had very much to do with their thoughts about what they were eating, or their thoughts about what they looked like, or their thoughts about their abilities, or their emotions about themselves, or their emotions about how they show up and how they're accepted within the world. Those were parts of it. So, the overall way that we view the body as needing to be a certain way is the very vice that keeps us stuck. And to figure out what's our individual best, looking at our individual best, and then doing the work to say that's enough. Because it's hard for all of us, but we can do it. We can work enough to say that we get to a point where say, I am enough at this weight and at this height and at this body shape. And that can be anywhere along the spectrum, but
yeah, for sure,
being able to feel empowered.
Yeah, totally. I think with the magazines and the publications, I just don't think they'll ever change, because I don't know how you could make this like emotional, energetic piece look sexy on a front page of a cover.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's possible.
You're
Because
right.
at the end of the day, for me, what you're talking about is like, what energy do you carry most of the time? What do you emit out there? Are you in more of a state of happiness, joy, gratitude, or are you in like the lines of the more kind of like negative emotions? And like, if you're, let's say, even 20-30% carrying those negative emotions around with you, your body's never really going to be in a position to literally change the matter, change the physical part of you. And you can go into the like digestive aspect of that. Like, the people who carry a lot of stress with them, a lot of negative emotions, their body is not really in a strong position to break down their food to create nutrition for you.
Right.
I'm convinced if you gave like the most spiritually empowered monk a donut of diets for a month, none of their body markers would change, right? Because they would be able to actually take the nutrition necessary from a donut and eliminate the stuff that they wouldn't need, and actually be able to manufacture necessary nutrition, because that individual is basically just like 100% full of like love and gratitude, I suppose. I don't know much about monks, but I presume that most of the time they're in more of like an enlightened, energetic, deep aura state, where they're just in like the prime way for their body to do what it does best, which is to heal and make you feel good, and to do all these cool things. So yeah, like, what energy is it that you're emitting? What's your relationship with weight loss? What's your relationship with your body? If it's anything remotely going towards the the negative side, you're gonna struggle. It's just gonna You could do it. There are totally people out there that change their bodies purely off
Right.
their own like rage and self anger and jealousy and all these things.
Right.
People can do it. It's super, super rare, but people can totally do that. They're not gonna be happier at the end of the day when they do get their amazing body and they look great. They're never going to be happy with that, because they're not
Right.
changing the
Right.
psychology. But it's interesting that maybe that could be the starting piece of a deep habitual change with nutrition and food, and all these other things that come with it can come in the shape of like self-reflection with like meditation and like slow bodied yoga and things like that, and breathing, becoming more conscious and aware of like what is going on with the mind and the body, creating that internal creation where we can actually sense what's going on with our body and be a little bit more be a bit kinder to this beautiful, wonderful thing that's been, that's just quite remarkable and marvelous when we give it the time and space and nutrients to do what it does best. But we get in our own way so much, especially from the external things that we see, from magazines and TV and these other things that we really, really, unfortunately, allow us to completely change our internal state to being dependent on what's going on around us through our senses, and forget
Yeah.
that we do have this beautiful mind, we do have this beautiful body that's got the ability to create chemistry that will benefit us
Yeah.
in so many
That's so
different ways.
profound.
Okay,
Yeah, that's so
thanks.
profound. And I think, and that's the thing too, is like you bring up a point too. We can move into, we do almost the same thing with that energy that we're emitted, where we kind of say, okay, I've got to emit good energy, good energy, good energy. Well, there's the same wound there, like let's look at it like, sometimes we can, so we go on this like, I've done this myself, you go on this like positive attitude diet, like I'm going to have a positive attitude. I'm going to have a positive attitude. And it's like, and then when you can't, or when you're having a hard day, then we go into shame because we're not doing it right. Well, what if we can't do it for a good reason? You know what I mean? What if in that moment we had, like you say, some compassion for ourselves, that we're having a hard time right now? And for me, I've always done better having a practitioner help me through that. It just is to have someone else work me through those feelings has just been beneficial to me, because sometimes when I'm in my own head, I don't know what's left and what's right sometimes, because you're just in that state. But like again, like just sometimes getting that positive, we need help even getting that positive attitude. And it makes sense when we understand some of these, like I talked about before, when we talk about some of these missing pieces that we've lost along our way. Like the example I gave, how can I ever feel like I would be good if I had kind of compartmentalized that away, put that away somewhere? My psyche had taken that belief that I was good and shut it down. And then I'm expected to be good. I can pretend, I know how to act like I'm good. I'm aware of that, but do I feel it? No. And how empowering that is to actually just really authentically have those positive emotions part of our toolbox. And sometimes we need help with that. Sometimes that, and I think it's interesting. Sometimes that has happened from a nutritional standpoint, and then sometimes it's happening, and and that the nutrition is missing, so we need to bring that in to support that. And it's like a circular thing, and then that sometimes that nutrient comes in, and then we're able to see that we have these emotions, or we're able to have the ability to um it's like when one of the bodies is really depleted, I can't help support this balanced way of being. And so when each body's in full flow, then they can support each other. So I think it's fantastic that you guys have taken on that role of being that really important food nutrient that can support that part, so that now that part can also support this part, and then it can support this part. Our health is the number one thing. If our health isn't in flow, isn't in check, that's going to take a lot of our capacity. That just is. So it's really important to look at health in an important way. And if we can't get to that health, understand why we can't get there. Like,
Yeah.
what's stopping us?
Yeah, we just see some miraculous things, especially with Empower Plus, which is our broad spectrum micronutrient, our flagship product. We see so many profound, very quick changes within all types of people across, let's say, the spectrum of mental disorders, because we're reestablishing the more common nutrient deficiencies, especially mineral deficiencies that we see with a lot of people. And a lot of people who are either, like, let's just say, like mildly depressed, or like super like clinically depressed. It's gonna be very, very difficult for those individuals to even think about like eating a decent meal, or even their bodies to even have the physical capability of breaking a good meal down. Like you could be pretty depressed, or even mildly depressed, and eat a really great, nice organic meal every day. Your body's not going to be able to get the nutrients available for it. And that's never going to really like push you through the barrier to make you kind of like lift that cloud of like depression, to make you think different thoughts that aren't continuously spiraling you into a depression. But when you're taking a broad spectrum micronutrient that's processed in such a way, chelated and bioavailable, that doesn't matter how bad your digestion is, you're consuming this product and you are getting it into your blood, into your brain very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start doing that on a consistent basis, even after just a few days, people literally, they say like it's like a veil is lifted off their mind, and they're able to just like see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it gives them the capacity and the ability to think a little bit differently, think
Mm-hmm.
about maybe making a different choice. Rather than going for the bag of cookies, they might
Mm-hmm.
go for a walk and go to the farmer's market and make their own food. Like it's not going to like heal you or cure you, you know, in a very simple, like one pill kind of a way, like a one solution way. It's just going to give people the ability to think about other things that are not making them depressed, and then going out there and doing them, because we know that our mental health it's holistic, it's you know, it's holism, it's just more than just like one aspect. But if you're physically and mentally not ever in a position to start thinking about those things, moving your body, sleeping better, reducing screens, hydration, blah blah blah, we can go on forever, you're never going to be able to do them if your body it doesn't have the resources to think about that in the first place. But once you do, then you can just start doing magical things.
Agreed. I totally agree. When I interact with the mental, emotional, physical body, those kind of things, that to me, we hold a lot of emotion in our abdomen. That's where, you know, we have, like, if you think of like excitement, it's usually in our abdomen. If you think of like fear, it's usually in our abdomen. We might have a lot of love and affection up here, but we have a lot in our, and so, and that's the place we absorb nutrients. Like, right? That's where that magic happens, is in our gut. That's where we, and so, you know, I think, even piggybacking on the weight loss, or even that whole thing, it's like that idea of hunger, and what are we really hungry for? And sometimes we need, like you say, we need that support. So we're getting that nutrient, so our body isn't hungering for something, and then it has the capacity to do other things. So it totally makes sense to me. It totally makes sense to me that you're having success with that. That's great.
Beautiful. Just before we finish up, how's your husband doing now?
You know, it's been fascinating. We have a really good therapist that he works with, and understanding that for him, his childhood wounding wasn't what happened, but what didn't happen. And it registered in his body as pain, with no memory really attached to it, because it, if you don't get this attention, if you don't get, hey, how was your day today? We need that biologically. We biologically need to be seen and heard. And when that didn't happen, he had enough food, and he had enough clothing, and enough, but there was no attunement there. So in that still face experiment, he had dealt with that kind of a experience for most of his childhood, and it had caused a lot of beliefs to be formed, as well as these emotional wounds that are stored in his body. So working through some of those things, learning about the ACE score. I don't know if you know anything about that the ACE study, which is adverse childhood experiences, and how they can correlate those experiences in childhood up against some of these diseases. Like, the correlations are just huge, hundreds of percent, versus, you have about when you move into 4 adverse childhood experiences. If you go to my website, mechellewingle.com, and scroll to the bottom, you can click on that and take the test. It's just a 10-question test. I talk about it. I have a podcast for the Wholeness Network podcast. We did an episode a couple back, where I really went into the ACE score and talked about the correlations, and how, we have these experiences in our childhood, and they've correlated them into with, at 4, if you have 4, your probability of getting maybe some of these autoimmune diseases go up by like 400%. Like, we're not just saying, hey, it's not a 50% chance. It's like hundreds of percent. The suicide rate is up 1,200%. And the thing is these things, it's not just that happen to us, but they are built into the telomeres of our DNA and get passed down through generations. So it might not even been our thing. It might not even been our trauma that we're experiencing. So yeah, thank you for asking. He's doing much better. We're understanding those wounds and how they show up, and how this need to be on high alert was what was causing a lot of the depression and anxiety. But it was his nervous system was developed under this state of anxiety, and that became his normal state.
His
So
default, yeah.
His default. So, and you can keep up with it for so long, but when we hit, sometimes when we get those 40s, those 40s come and everything starts to slow down. But no, I've got to have this, I've got to keep this up. I've got to keep up this hypervigilance, because that's what's keeping me alive,
Certainly.
to be on alert and out, making sure I'm not going to get hurt. So calming, doing those exercises that there's a lot of Reiki I do for him that helps calm that nervous system down, get that nervous system to feel safe and secure once again. So yeah, he's doing amazingly. And it's been really interesting to see. It's really been influential for me to really look at trauma. I've gone back and been trauma trained in a couple different modalities and different areas to really understand trauma and how that affects us, and how it's a real, what is considered trauma, and what does that look like, and how does it show up, and what are our responses. So yeah, thank you for asking. Great. It's doing well.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So where can people connect with you?
Well, I have a website. My website is my name, mechellewingle.com. And then I'm an owner of and founder of a great platform called the Wholeness Network. And what we've done there is we've created a library of small videos, 5-10 minutes. We want it to be just easy, but it's like Netflix for wellness. And we've just got a lot of videos in there. We have, there's videos you can go along. I've done a bunch of tapping videos, so when you're having some anxiety, you can get on there. I work you through a tapping exercise. We have all kinds of support. It's support for mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And then we also have all kinds of emotional things, where if I'm feeling depressed, or if I'm anxious, or if I'm experiencing grief, or those kind of things. So it's this library, this video library that we have that's amazing. And we've just started. We added to that this whole new kind of platform. So that was just kind of a video, these videos. And now we've added some live events. So you can go in, and we have our experts that come on live. And I'm starting a twice a month gathering online there called Thrive On, where I've created a step program. I think the 12 steps are really, really fascinating. And so I kind of created my own, and we were working the steps for whatever you've got going on.
Great.
And so that's part of the library, and it's great. So that's thewholenessnetwork.com. It's where you can go there, and just everything wholeness is my passion.
Beautiful. That's great. Well, I'll make sure that all those links are available in the show notes for people to connect with you with those programs, those videos, and also your website as well. And I've got your social media tags as well. That's just your name as well. So that's easy. Yep. That's perfect. But thank you so much for coming on to True Hope Cast today. I think we covered some really beautiful topics, and I think we had a great chat. I hope you do. I hope you do too.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be with you. I support all that you're doing. I think you guys are amazing, and I wish and send all my blessings to your work, and I see it as vital to our well-being. So thank you for doing the work.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you again. And that is it for this week. Thank you very much for listening, guys. I'll make sure that all those links to connect with Mechelle are available in the show notes, so you can get over there and check out her awesome stuff. I implore you to do so. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. If you're listening on iTunes, leave us a little bit of a review. But that is it for this week on True Hope Cast. We'll see you next week.